He has a wife, but it's his cousin. Yes, you heard that right. And she hasn't even laughed in 8 years. Xena just seems depressed all the time. But then Maddie has a great idea that they should just expire and slam into a tree. And Ethan is just kind of like, yeah, okay. Hello everyone, today we will be covering Ethan Frome, a book written in 1911 by Edith Wharton at 37,000 words, or 99 pages of the Kindle edition that I have. I know, I typically read fantasy, but I'm open to trying any kind of book, and because it's not traditionally fantasy, I worry that I maybe tuned out a little bit or skimmed through some parts. So what we're going to do today is we're going to split the video into two parts. The first half of the video, I'll be covering over what I think the book meant and what I took away from it. And then in the second half of the video, I'll be Googling things and seeing what the consensus is and see how well what I said matches up or is just incorrect. It's a media literacy test that I'm forcing upon myself. If I'm too lazy to edit that, I was supposed to say Gen Z media literacy test. So, what do I think of Ethan? I think he's a loser. He never follows through with his aspirations. He has a farm, but he doesn't keep up with the farm work. He has a wife, but it's his cousin. Yes, you heard that right. And she hasn't even laughed in 8 years. That's loser behavior. Also, maybe it's like the winters, and maybe the winters equal loserness, like the winters are like draining him, and he's just like a miserable person. I think there's something there. But let's just start at the beginning. In the beginning of the book, it opens up with a narrator character trying to piece together Ethan's story. They're visiting Starkfield, and Ethan caught their interest for some reason, and the narrator is trying to figure out what happened all those years ago. So most of the book is a flashback. The book centers around Ethan Frome and his cousin wife, Xena. I hope I misread that. I'm not checking until the second half of this video. I'm pretty sure it's his cousin, and that still weirds me out. And the third character, Maddie, who is Xena's cousin. So like, Ethan's second cousin, or like, let's just say distant cousin. One of the first scenes I remember is Maddie dancing with a guy named Dennis, and Ethan's watching them, and Ethan's jealous. But why is Ethan jealous if he has a wife? That's because he's a loser who's not happy with what he has. I think that kind of extends throughout the book, especially to his wife Xena, as I already mentioned. Xena just seems depressed all the time. And I don't think it's because her husband is infatuated with her cousin, who's like his distant cousin or whatever. I don't think she even finds that out until later in the book. I think it's the fact that for when she married her cousin for some reason, she moved to Starkfield initially to take care of Ethan's mom, and then never left. And that's another thing with Ethan, is Ethan also never left Starkfield, even though I think he wanted to. And that kind of brings me to another kind of like sillier idea that I had, that Starkfield, the city, or maybe like the winter, is kind of like its own character, like kind of like how Batman movies, Gotham is like a character. Like most people want to leave their hometown, same thing with Ethan, but something always tethers him to the hometown, and he can just like never seem to escape. Now a little later in the book, around chapter 6 or 7, Ethan is super happy because now he has the opportunity to cheat on his wife, and then later he's happy that he didn't. Then around that time there's an argument between him and Xena where she catches him in a lie. I think earlier he said he was making money, but then he doesn't have the money, and because he was trying to make the money, he couldn't drive her to the doctor, so she had to get somebody else to drive her to the doctors, and she's like super sick, but maybe not. And whether she's sick or not sick, Ethan just disregards it entirely, because I think there's like some kind of like quote in the book where he's like, well, everyone has problems. Which I guess is kind of true, but still, if somebody has a problem, maybe don't completely disregard it, I don't know. And kind of throughout like the middle of the book, I thought Xena was going to have an affair with the guy who drove her to the hospital. But I don't think there's a lot of evidence for that. Maybe like Ethan was projecting because he was having those feelings for Maddie. Or maybe I was projecting onto Xena because Ethan, the main character, the POV character, was having those feelings for Maddie. So maybe I was just assuming things without there being much evidence, and nothing ever came of it. Now, when Xena starts suspecting things, she tries to force Maddie out of the house by saying she needs an in-home nurse, and the in-home nurse needs the guest bedroom. Maddie could technically do it, or just like help her around more, but I think she's just using it as an excuse to get Maddie out of the house. Then when Ethan finds out that Maddie is moving out, that causes Xena to laugh for the first time in her 7 or 8 years of marriage. That is depressing. Now this is weirdly where I start to relate to Ethan in some weird roundabout way. So first he goes downstairs to Maddie and he's like, listen, I'm not going to let you leave. He's trying to be very noble, and I don't really remember the details, but I think if she gets kicked out, she has nowhere to go, and she's pretty much screwed. Ethan tries to think of a way to leave Starkfield, but just can't figure it out. Either he leaves with no money, and him and Maddie are screwed, or he just screws over Xena. Even then, I don't think it really works. I think there's some issues where it's like, even if he sold the farm, even if he sold some of his equipment, Xena still wouldn't have a lot of money to live, and it seemed like he was just kind of stuck. He is trapped in Starkfield, and we already know from the prologue that he is still in Starkfield, so we know that whatever he does fails. I guess that's the part that I relate to him the most, is that he's trying to come up with a plan to be happy, but ultimately, no matter how hard he tries, he's ultimately going to fail. There is a point where he's trying to ask money from the Hales, or like Mrs. Hale, but then he realizes that asking money from a nice family to abandon his sick wife is kind of absurd, and he ultimately goes against it. Now, while he's taking Maddie to the train station, they go to where they first fell in love, I guess, or at least where he first fell in love with her. I honestly wasn't even sure if she reciprocated those feelings, but it seems like she does towards the end at the very least. It's kind of assumed that it happened the whole time, but I don't really know. Then they realize at that place that they can't live without each other. They love each other, blah 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 blah. However, still, no solutions have been brought up. So, naturally, they go sledding in the dead of night when it's pitch black. As you do. They go down the hill, nothing happens. Ethan's like familiar with the landscape or whatever. Everything's cool. But then Maddie has a great idea that they should just expire and sled into a tree. And Ethan is just kind of like, yeah, okay. And during these sledding events, they're thinking about all their like shared memories together, and it's kind of sweet until Maddie brings up the expiring stuff. And when they sled down a second time, that is the accident that's brought up in the beginning of the book. Oh yeah, I forgot. There's an accident that was brought up in the beginning of the book. Now in present day, the narrator goes over to their house and sees that Maddie's there, kind of broken. Xena seems to be happier, I think is like the implication. And also, Ethan Frome is also kind of broken and sad and depressed. So since Maddie is depressed now, and kind of like Xena was at the beginning of the book, I think it's more just like whoever Ethan focuses on becomes depressed and sad. I think it's also because of the accident. I think maybe there's like a second meaning to it, where he infects the people around him, or at least the people he cares about. He continues living with Xena, but I think that's only because she takes care of him, and that their relationship was over, or has been over for a very long time. So if I had to guess about what this book is about, I think it has to do with infidelity, never doing anything with your life, and kind of rash thinking, because Ethan doesn't seem to like think ahead, and he just kind of goes with the flow, and like things turn out horribly. So those are my guesses. I will now look things up on the interwebs and see if that matches what other people think. I don't know. I hope I'm right. Okay, I'm back. So it seems like there is a consensus on like some of the themes being family, like I guess sure whatever, love, death, lust, betrayal, all the general fun ones. Winter, I think, is supposed to represent the underlying anxieties Ethan has. I saw that in a couple different places. I don't really think that counteracts much of what I said about Winter, which is just like the winter, it kind of holds him back, or something tethers him to the town, or something along those lines. So I think I was pretty close. Now there's a whole plot line I kind of forgot to mention that has to do with a pickle dish. Xena loves the pickle dish because it's a wedding gift that they got, and it's the only nice thing in their house, and it kind of represents their whole marriage. So, anyways, while Xena's away visiting a doctor, Ethan and Maddie break it. Now, it was an accident, of course, but still, come on. This is when Ethan is excited that he has an opportunity to cheat while she's out of town. I think Maddie is the one that breaks it, and then when Xena comes back, they blame it on a cat, and that's partially why Xena plans on sending her away. Now, when I was reading the book, I just kind of thought that the pickle dish represented their marriage, and when it broke, that was like the end of Xena and his relationship. I think there's a couple more layers to it. It is also a representation of infidelity, I guess, which makes sense. It's something that they do. They try to hide it, and they can't take it back. And after this incident, they don't want to be seen around each other too much. They both have a strong sense of guilt of what they did. I saw one complaint that most of the drama happens in this book because no one talks with each other. I think that makes sense because I think they both gave up on their relationship a long time ago and they just don't want to talk with each other. Like even early in the book, he's like falling out of love with his wife. He mentions that she's 28, but she looks way older because of her illness. Now, throughout all my research, I couldn't find anyone that said Ethan is a loser type person that spreads his sadness and his sorrow, but I still think it works. Like, kind of as I mentioned before, he doesn't like keep up with his farm work, does anything that has to do with Maddie, and even throughout the most of the book, he doesn't make any real decisions. However, many people view Ethan as sympathetic because he's the main character, he's the POV, and they view Xena as a vindictive and condescending and a hypochondriac, which I'm not really sure if I agree with that last one. But a lot of people said it, and maybe even it was mentioned in the book. I don't really fully agree with that, but it is Ethan's POV, so sure. One thing that does poke a hole in my loser theory or my idea of that is that Ethan is ultimately a very helpful person. He tries to help people when they need help. Like most protagonists do, he helps, Xena when she's sick. He helped his parents, that's why he never moved out. And then at the end of the book, he's trying to help Xena. Or Maddie, sorry. Which brings me to my next point, I think, kind of, is that Maddie is everything Xena isn't. She's young, she's bright, she's kind of hot headed, she's rash, she's fun, she has a lot of energy, she brings joy to his life, and at the end of the book, she becomes exactly like Xena through the accident, I guess, but still, I think the two have something to do with one another. Overall, I did enjoy reading the book. It's very different from the fantasy books that I read. No swords, no dragons, blah blah blah. But the prose are very gripping, and I only read it in 2 days. So, yeah, I recommend it. It's quick, it's nice. Yeah, that's all I got.